I was playing with strangers at a game shop. One player will already do the module and proceed to just insta-solve every room, with the DM just saying, "Yep," and going on to the next page. Genius was beaming with pride. Seemed like DM was used to this speed-running champ, didn't seem to be bothered or surprised or anything. Just ran the game like a bored teen working at McDonald's. Every single time the player finished describing their turn, I half expected him to say, "Is that all for your order?" I had to struggle to withhold frequent requests for ketchup. Also, we had a documentarian, aka the player who shouted, not said, shouted. I write that down in my notebook. Anytime the party discovered any information, despite there never being any sign that failing to confirm your character's note-taking habit would have any future consequences. He did not actually write the information down, by the way. That would have been silly. The DM never acknowledged him, not even slightly, and I do believe he may have been a ghost. That story is filled with people who are just stupid. But what about a more particular kind of stupid? Lawful stupid. Roll the intro, and let's get started. From user/Gilfinkton, a player decided that his paladin was going to try to kill his own god. In the old 1st edition days, paladins were so strict, they weren't even supposed to associate with neutral people. This made this particular player get it into their head that neutral was just a different type of evil, and was going to put a village to the sword, unless they kicked out everyone who wasn't lawful good. The village priest was capable of casting no alignment. Well, they refused to act against people who were just law-abiding citizens. The night before the disaster, the god sent a dream to the paladin, warning the paladin to inspire others rather than slaughter the misguided, to stay within the law while imposing injustice. The paladin decided that his god was protecting evil, and therefore needed to be struck down immediately. The paladin died long before reaching the god. I've always wondered, do players like this get a kick out of having their actions restricted to what their alignment will quote-unquote allow? Always remember that actions dictate alignment, not the other way around. It'll just result in a more fun D&D experience when you have more freedom to make decisions as your character. From user/Cthulhu Noodles, the character was a person so religiously stubborn that he went against the expressed teachings of his own religion because he decided that his interpretation had to be right, and so he needed to slaughter all the people who didn't fit exactly into his worldview. Sure is good that we don't have people like that in the real world. From user Netheril3, for me, one guy in particular will always stand out. Several years ago, a friend of mine was running Shackled City in Dungeons & Dragons 3.5e. I'm always down for urban games, and the dice were kind to me, giving me a serious tank of stats rolled right in front of him. So I had a barbarian fighter who was angling towards frenzied berserker, because hey, why not? The rest of the party was a bard played by a guy who kept trying to make references to modern pop culture, which largely fell flat. The DM's girlfriend, who didn't quite get that when you failed a social check that you couldn't just keep rolling the dice until you got the result you wanted, in addition to abandoning the party at the first sign of actual trouble, and a guy I will refer to as Lantern. Lantern was the paladin in question, and he was one of those paladins. He was, of course, the son of a noble family in the city proper. Now, I'll be the first to admit that playing noble characters can be fun. Playing paladins can be fun. Playing characters who are both of those things takes a bit of finesse and self-awareness. Lantern had neither of those things. As an example, the DM asked the party what they were doing during the festival that's going on when the game opens. My character was prepping for his favorite events. The bard was doing some face paintings, even the cowardly druid was wandering around taking in the sights. Lantern states he's patrolling the crowd, looking for criminals, in full armor, and armed, in the middle of a city with its own guard, who are also on hand for such a public event. Our DM takes a moment to gently remind Lantern that he is not deputized and isn't a member of the guard. More importantly, his family is minor, and is more like being upper middle class than real powerful nobility. He nods and reiterates he is on patrol, looking for criminals. So our DM throws him a bone. He sees a kid steal a piece of candy from a vendor, a kid who is barely old enough to shave, who stole something barely worth a copper piece. Now, I don't know if this was a test, or if the DM just wanted the player to feel included, but I doubt he expected what happened next. Said paladin goes bolting after the child, bellowing for him to stop. He would have killed this child if the DM hadn't used that special tone of voice asking him if this lawful good upholder of the law and justice was about to murder a child for stealing a few pennies worth of candy. Instead, he beats the child into unconsciousness, manacles him, and hands him over to the guards. This sort of logic recurred time and time again in the very brief period of time Lantern played in the campaign. Any small infraction he could find, he would immediately clamp down his helmet and go stomping off to find the perpetrators, often while ignoring the significantly bigger breaches of the law that both he and those he was allied with were committing. A breaking and entering to catch a thieves guild off guard was a big one, since the barbarian just hacked a bench through a plate glass window and came charging in after it in the middle of the night. But how did he get the name Lantern, you ask? Well, when the party invaded the underground stronghold of a thieves guild, no one had a light source. They didn't bother my PC, since even though he passed for human, he was still a half-orc. Everyone else in the party was human, and therefore totally blind. So rather than fetching a torch or going back for a lantern, they opted to stumble around in pitch black darkness, getting ambushed and taking 50% mischances for 3/4 of the dungeon. Then, when their tank finally went down and they were trying to stop the bleeding in the dark, the paladin declares, "Would it help if I lit my lantern?" I think the rest of the table was near to drawing and quartering him. Even the DM, who thought he'd seen every stupid action the player could take, he was still shocked by that one. From user/Dr. Richtovid, I think this falls more into pure stupid territory, but anyway, this paladin was supposed to be lawful good, but that proved to be false instantly. On the first mission he joins us, we were tasked to enter the fantasy version of the Vatican to talk to the fantasy version of the Pope, who was, understandably, not the easiest person to get an audience with. We decided to get a letter of recommendation from the bishop in a nearby village to ensure entrance. The paladin decided to waltz up to the gates and demand free passage, while refusing to give out any information about who he was or what he wanted. When that obviously failed, he hid out in the woods, had a bird scout out the inner courtyard, and just never rejoined the party. Stringent and unreasonable demand fails you entirely? There is only one solution. Abandon party. Join bird. From user Lucky Giraffe. In the 90s, I played a few sessions at a table that was just a crapshoot from top to bottom, but the standouts were the Paladin and the DM. The DM was a smart, creative dude whose world notes took up a huge binder, and whose NPCs were as full-fledged and interesting as any I had ever seen, but any awesomeness was more than negated by him being the DM versus PC type, with that mindset to an abusive degree. The Paladin was, well, he was straight up chaotic evil, constantly using his high charisma to dominate and intimidate in social encounters, regularly resorting to torture not to accomplish a goal, but because they're evil, and threatening and even attacking, albeit 2nd edition subduing, other player characters if they didn't go along with exactly what he wanted. One time, an enemy had a hostage as a living shield, and the Paladin's solution was to kill the hostage. It was the most murder hobo thing imaginable, and the DM let it happen. Oh, and actively enabled this behavior by making every NPC a Machiavellian mastermind who would have betrayed us if given the chance. Of course, he would only reveal this after the Paladin had hung them upside down and skinned them. And possibly the worst part of it, the Paladin was evil asshole number 4. Number 4, the 4th. This was the 4th consecutive iteration of this character in that DM's world. I lasted about 3 sessions, during which my level 3 character, everyone else was level 8, I was expected to catch up, had to 1v1 a hill giant. It didn't go very well, and was interrogated and tortured by the Paladin to see if I'm worthy of joining his party. But I'm joining the party anyway because the Paladin saved my life from the hill giant, and now I'm basically his slave. And at the end of the final session, during wrap-up, I said I was probably not going to play anymore because of made-up reasons that had nothing to do with the campaign or the players. The Paladin's player told me quite literally, "You see that sword hanging on that wall? If I ever see your face around here again, I will mess you up. You're dead to me." Oh my god, it's a sword guy! Ay ay ay. I know everyone talks about the I am very badass knife guys, but I'm always thinking of the I am very badass sword guys. I know way more of those. It's good to see people making fun of them on this sub. Good times. Anyway, next one. From user Elsa Stegosaurus. Not too bad in the grand scheme of things, but I had a paladin walk into a crime lord's estate with one other PC by her side. The two other player characters were outside as to not invite suspicion. This crime lord, who had copious thugs and mages at her immediate beck and call, was thought to be the mastermind of the king's assassination. The paladin put her foot down in the seat of this crime lord's power and basically said, "Right, you're under arrest." And to be fair, the paladin had the authority to do so, but did she also have a death wish? After the crime lord's subsequent attempted poisoning failed because of course the paladin was dumb/bold enough to drink the wine in front of her, the crime lord kicked things off and a massive battle ensued. The paladin bounced off the floor twice with failed death saves both times, including a coup attempt by the crime lord that left the paladin with a single death save left. Basically, everyone inside the manor perished, including a few innocents, and the player characters found themselves on the run from local authorities due to the massive commotion they caused. Super frustrating at the time, and I still kind of regret not just killing the paladin out of spite, but the dice were in their favor, and they got out fair and square. At least it made for a memorable story. From user/Phoenix Havoc. Had a player who was clearly a power gamer abusing the class because I would not allow his broken homebrew while I was a new DM. Tried to make every scene about him, blatantly abuse me giving everyone a starting magic item, and complained I was personally trying to ruin his fun because he drew from the deck of many things and got a bad card. Some of the highlights. Constantly threatened to kill the rogue if they so much as pulled out thieves' tools, or snuck to find a murder suspect. Killed a small child for lying and starting a fight after their town was destroyed by the Tarrasque. Killed all enemies regardless if they surrendered or not, including the ones the party needed to investigate. Constantly committed crimes despite telling the rogue he would murder her for doing such things. Accused me of rigging a fight just because he lost to a barbarian in a no magic duel/wrestling match that was the same level as him. Roleplayed only when it suited him, went pure mechanics if the roleplay would hinder him. Example, stops being lawful good as soon as he wants to do something evil, then continues to be lawful good when the rogue wants to pick a pocket. And finally, he acted like the only party member that did anything or mattered at all. You rogue, stop doing all of the things that your class is meant to do immediately to give us a party advantage. Disgusting, horrible. That has offended my lawful good sensibilities. From user SoupmanBob. Sadly, I don't have a lot of TTRPG experience. I hope you will all accept the story of this World of Warcraft roleplay instead. I can say without a doubt that Paladins are among the classes I've had the most fun with. I mained one when I played. Role-playing a paladin was even better, especially when you have so many races with so many faiths and so many ways of achieving their powers. This also meant that there's many ways to interpret how to be a paladin. However, the absolute worst I have ever played with was possibly the most absolute, rigorous, and elitist son of a bitch I have ever seen. This was a guy who, by his own admission, had studied the lore very closely, and he had, by his own thoughts, the truest paladin you've ever seen. He played a human lad. He also threw in some Catholic celibacy and sexism, as he declared that paladin was a man-only profession, even though the lore didn't support that statement. Every action he took was preceded by prayer, and while you may think that is perfectly fine, I do mean every single action. Go for a walk? Prayer. Feed a dog? Prayer. Go to church to pray? Prayer. Everything needed a prayer according to him. If paladins don't pray, they lose their powers. By his explanation, he would, in general, talk down to all female characters, painting them in that classic Catholic light of them being housewives, basically among the property of either their father or husband. He saw himself as the law, since paladins were the champions of the human faith, and faith had a huge impact on the law in World of Warcraft. He believed himself a law enforcement entity. He would try to arrest people or punish them for going against his faith or what he perceived to be the law. He would preach at everyone he disagreed with. He was racist against other races, especially night elves, for having a mostly matriarchal society. He hated every race except dwarves. He liked dwarves. He would use the faith excuse that only dwarves shared his character's faith, but he would still be racist towards Draenei, even though they had the same faith too. But to him, it was like classic Catholic versus classic Protestant. They weren't true believers. That doesn't even make any sense. The Draenei have been worshipping the light for, I believe, longer than humans have existed in this world, and have communicated directly with the Naru, entities sent by the light. They're like angels. So, what? You may be wondering by now, why didn't I just ignore this guy and say bye? Yeah? I mean, it was an online game after all, and there's a lot of players. First of all, I did try to ignore him, but we were in the same guild, and most of us, myself included, fell for his "I'm just playing my character" excuse, and this was just his character's personal beliefs. Whenever we pointed out lore inconsistencies to him, it became apparent after a time, not a very long time, 2 weeks at most, that he actually believed this stuff about paladins, when he threw his crap fit about a minor paladin guild having a female leader, about how it was lore destruction, and we should blacklist them. There had already been red flags. Now he had been disrespectful towards a female officer in the guild, or straight up ignored what she said, or how he got annoyed when my character was talking about having children. He put a female paladin character on his ignore list and acted like she didn't exist, and very few noticed until she tried to whisper him during a guild chat discussion about something or other, I can't remember. And he obviously kept ignoring her, as putting her on an ignore list means he literally can't see what she says. He explained this as having done it by mistake when he was inspecting her character once and never noticed. By that point, we were already pretty suspicious. Anyway, it became obvious he was playing some sort of wish fulfillment character that allowed him to be blatantly racist and sexist, so he got sacked and blacklisted. The funny thing is, I can't for the life of me even remember his character's name. As horrible as this story is, it does take me back to the time of grinding out my Worgen Rogue in World of Warcraft. Good times. Really miss those days. But yeah, this one is absolutely ridiculous. It's not good to be rude to someone because, oh, it's lore accurate. No, it doesn't matter. A person is a person, and you shouldn't hold the lore over being nice to people. Unless you're all on the same page, don't use the lore as an excuse to be rude to others. It's not good. It's rude. Bad. But on top of that, it's not even accurate to the lore anyway, so I don't even know what this guy was doing. From user Fluberbaduberbub. Does it have to be a paladin per se, or could it be something similar? Would it work if I told you about an anime-inspired, lawful good, noble background high elf knight that's self-taught blade singer with her own invented style of swordsmanship? Because according to her, they don't teach blade singing to women, so she just invented her own superior style with no prior training. Oh, and she has both a drow squire and a retainer that she goes into too much detail about, who regularly get the party into trouble by ruining our stealth attempts with her delusional grandstanding, and holding us up by spending 30 minutes in the middle of a necromancer's lair trying to save a brainwashed slave that the DM has repeatedly told her is beyond saving until we kill the thing influencing him. And then throwing a tantrum in character and threatening to leave the party after, surprise surprise, failing to save him. And then throwing a bigger tantrum when we don't all sympathize with her and beg her to come back, constantly bragging about how overpowered her stats and abilities were and how she could destroy anybody in the party if we were ever to PvP. But then I got a look at her character sheet, and it turned out she had way too many concentration spells and useless utilities. Useless because they were already covered by our other party members, while she was supposed to be our combat mage. And never used the decent spells she did have. Basically, all she had was a reasonably high AC, and guess what? There are numerous classes that can do better. Does that count? I feel like I just read a poor man's descent into madness. Well, hope he's doing okay after whatever the hell that experience was. Finally, from user/electronic outside 4. This is another tale from my paid DM adventures. One of the things I see a lot is people who just want to cock out and play silly little tropes in short games. It makes sense. Who wants to invest a lot of time in a character for 2 to 3 short sessions with strangers? So when this group handed their character sheets out, no alarm bells were rung. There were 5 players, but only 2 were the problem. This Lawful Stupid Paladin and the chaotic annoying Bard. The Paladin was a special case. She was lawful neutral and would follow the letter of the law precisely and firmly. I personally prefer it when PCs follow the law. It means I'm much less likely to have to rein in a torture scene, deal with the party stealing from each other, or such shenanigans. But this Paladin would only do something if the law of her god said she could. Every few seconds, does my god let me open doors without knocking? Does my god prefer it if I eat bread with jam or peanut butter? She wouldn't wipe her ass if her god didn't specifically allow it. Very annoying, in and out of game. When I told her that I would let her know if her god wasn't happy with what she did, she would get annoyed and start accusing me and everyone else at the table of cutting her role-playing short. At the same time, Bard was 10 different characters in one. True chaotic. None of his decisions were making any sense. When I asked him to quit it, he handed me the classic, "It's what my character would do," and said he had a mysterious backstory which justified everything. I asked if he wanted to share that with me, the DM. He said no. If they weren't paying for my time, I'd have dropped them on session 1, but alas, I was saving up for the holiday. Playing with the two of them together was like herding cats. By the time the Paladin had decided she was allowed to do something, the Bard had flitted to the next thing like a psychopathic butterfly. He picked fights with NPCs who'd done nothing wrong, buddied up with the obvious bad guys, and skipped off without the group to do whatever the heck he wanted. With the plot and gameplay quickly derailing, I suggest we take a break, as usually I take time to myself to discuss things with all the other players. They weren't thrilled, but wanted to keep playing. So I was stuck with them for yet another session of horror. The Bard decides he's going to rob a grave. Long story short, they were ghost hunting, which is obviously not legal, so the Paladin tries to stop him. And then she realizes that her god wouldn't like her hurting a friend, so she can't do anything to him. Unfortunately, she says it aloud, and I could practically hear the Bard thinking. So he hits her. The players agreed that PvP would be allowed as long as it wasn't personal. He wasn't using any weapons, but she couldn't do anything back to him. I tried to intervene, but the Paladin tells me, "No, I've got this," and rolls a nat 1 to persuade him to stop it. I tried to step in again, and one of the other players tells me to let this play out, and the Paladin agrees because he won't seriously hurt me or anything. If you've ever seen that YouTube video of cooking a chicken by slapping it, it was like that. Slow, torturous, and painful to watch. That wee bastard Bard slapped all 44 of her hit points down to 0 somehow, one at a time. I didn't allow him to actually kill her, and luckily for me, the other players were in absolute hysterics. Paladin is freaking out, really annoyed. I point out she could have just stopped him or, walked away, and that she is still alive. The Bard turns to slap one of the others, and the whole party just jump him and singe him in one turn. His last words were, "I don't regret anything." The Paladin dropped out after this, but the Bard rerolled a much, much, much less annoying character. I said this earlier in the video, but it is worth saying again. Always remember that alignment doesn't really dictate your actions. Actions dictate your alignment, and it's not fun for you or the rest of the party to have your alignment be so restrictive on gameplay, or, in that Bard's case, so obtrusive to gameplay because of how obnoxious it is. Chaotic stupid, lawful stupid, these things are not good for healthy party dynamics, good role-playing, good storytelling. All they serve is to, make the party annoyed, as these stories have shown very, very well. Alignment is fun, but don't take it so seriously that it absolutely ruins a D&D game. Alright, if you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, we also have the Tabletop Tavern Tips series where we cover D&D advice. You can check that out on my channel, and also subscribe to see more of my content. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Lawful Stupid to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And that's just like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.